Chapter 13. The eyes that watch the house was silent as the first rays of dawn crept through the narrow slats of the wooden blinds. The air felt thicker than usual, as if the night's darkness had taken longer than it should have to fade. Thomas sat at the kitchen table, rubbing his eyes. It had been a long night, full of restless dreams, of shadows creeping just outside his reach. Dreams of a man, a face he couldn't place, but one that seemed to know him, know his soul. His grandmother's death, her funeral, his return to this place. It all felt like something was pulling at him, something deep and ancient, something that had been waiting, watching. Anna, of course, had noticed it first. She always did. She had been watching him again. Not the way a child watches a parent. No, this was different. It was as if she wasn't quite seeing him, but something else, something behind him. The way her eyes flicked from side to side, the way her lips tightened with confusion, as though she was trying to figure out something only she could see. That morning, as Thomas poured his coffee, Anna was standing by the window, staring out into the woods that bordered the property. Her small hands pressed against the glass, her brow furrowed. "He's been here a long time, Daddy," she said softly, her voice small, like it was meant for someone else. "Don't you see him?" Thomas froze, the warm mug in his hands feeling suddenly cold. His stomach turned. He didn't want to follow her gaze. He didn't want to see what she was seeing. But his bones, the way they hummed, told him it was a mistake to ignore her. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the empty woods beyond the house. The trees stood still in the early morning light, casting long, silent shadows. Nothing moved, nothing at all, but Thomas knew better. His skin prickled, as if it were more attuned to something invisible, something old, than his mind could comprehend. "Anna," he whispered, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. "What do you see?" She didn't answer. Instead, she tilted her head, her expression growing more puzzled. And that's when Thomas felt it. The pressure at the back of his neck, the sensation of being watched. His breath caught in his throat, and for the briefest moment, it felt like something dark had slipped from the forest, into the house. The days that followed were worse. It was as if the shadows had grown longer, and Anna's gaze grew sharper, more focused. She would sit in the living room, cross-legged on the floor, and speak in murmurs, her voice low, like a secret she wasn't supposed to share. One afternoon, Red found Anna like this, sitting in the center of the room, her eyes wide, her head cocked to one side. She was speaking to someone, but there was no one there. "Anna," Red called, her voice cautious as though afraid of disturbing something she didn't understand. Anna's head snapped toward her mother, and for a moment there was no recognition in her eyes. Then a grin spread across her face, a wide, unsettling grin, one that didn't quite fit on her childlike features. "I told him you wouldn't like it, Mommy," Anna said, her voice taking on a strange, unfamiliar tone. Red's heart raced. She stepped closer, her eyes scanning Anna's face. "Who are you talking to, Anna?" "The man from the mountain," Anna said matter-of-factly, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Red's blood ran cold. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words caught in her throat. The man from the mountain. The very same man Thomas had told her about all those years ago. A figure from his childhood nightmares. But it couldn't be. No, it shouldn't be. "The one who keeps calling Daddy," Anna added, her smile fading into something that resembled pity. Red's hands shook. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. It was as though the very walls were closing in. Then, as if to seal the horror, Anna giggled. A soft, innocent sound. But there was something wrong about it. "He says he'll wait." Red couldn't breathe. Her thoughts spiraled, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of what was happening. This couldn't be real. It couldn't. But deep down, she knew. There was something far more sinister at play than just a child's imagination. Something that had latched on to Thomas. And now Anna. Thomas was starting to lose his grip. It happened again, that feeling. The pull. The strange magnetic force that he couldn't escape. He had been driving, his hands gripping the steering wheel, the road blurring in his vision. He'd been thinking about everything. About his grandmother's death, the memories from his childhood, the things he'd never told Red. The pressure was growing inside him, threatening to crack his skull open, to spill out all the dark thoughts he'd kept buried. And then the feeling hit. A sudden, violent pull. It yanked him backward, deep into his bones. His vision tunneled, the world narrowing until it was nothing but a blur of colors and shapes. His ears rang with a deafening hum. His body felt light, like it wasn't his own. He couldn't breathe. When his senses returned, he was no longer on the road. He was parked at the base of the mountain. His truck sat there, engine idling, as though it had come to a stop on its own. But Thomas didn't remember turning. He didn't remember stopping. His hands shook as he reached for the door handle, his stomach heavy with dread. And then he saw it. His name, written in the dirt on the windshield. Thomas. In handwriting that looked disturbingly like his own. His stomach twisted, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached out to touch the letters, and the air around him felt colder. It was him. It had always been him. But who was the man from the mountain? Red had no idea what she was doing. The map Jim had drawn for her seemed almost too simple, too easy, but she had no choice. She had to find answers. For Anna. For Thomas. For herself. Her mind was clouded with fear, but her desperation kept her going. She had driven north, beyond the familiar roads, into the swamps of northeastern Carolina. The trail had become barely a footpath, the land growing more wild, more untamed the further she went. She had passed rusted-out cars, abandoned trailers, signs of a world that had long since been forgotten. And then she saw it. A cabin. Simple. Small. Smoke rising from the chimney. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected to find anything at all. She had been ready to turn back, to leave and forget all of this madness. But something inside her made her keep going. The sign on the door was painted by hand. Magic Joe. Red's mind screamed at her to turn around, to go back to the safety of her car, but she had come too far. She knocked. The door creaked open, and standing there, an old man, not weak, with eyes like fire and skin like leather, gazed at her. "I'm here to help," he said. "Come inside." And Red, though terrified, stepped over the threshold. She had crossed the line. There was no going back now. The man from the mountain had a name, and Red was about to learn it. End of Chapter 13.